Great. So I thought I'd just spend, 10 minutes or so just talking on some of those key changes to the program for this year. I did speak to them a little bit earlier in the workshop, but really just wanting to open up the opportunity for any questions for people here who have entered before, knowing that there has been some changes, and those key ones we have talked through a little bit. I thought I would talk about the online review component. So this one here, the set of questions that pertain to the online review are available in your nominees kit, but it will be prior to your site verification visit from the judge, or if your category doesn't include a site visit, it will be either one of our judges or myself completing the online review. And basically every nominee should be able to get full marks for the online review. If you haven't had a look at them in your nominees kit, they're 10 really simple questions prompting the judge to have a look at your website, check that the images are of high quality, they're not blurry. Is there a call to action on your website? Do you post regularly on your social media channels? Really sort of basic, best business practice questions for your online presence. So I encourage you to check out the online review questions in your nominees kit over the next week or so, because prior to that judge's site visit, there is opportunity to make changes to the images on your website. If you've just had a photo shoot and you've got some really high quality images, update them before your site judge has a look at your website, so you can get 10 out of 10 for that component. And that's all about sort of that business development piece. And the judge will flag anything when they come and meet with you, I'm sure. If they notice, your social media frequency of posting could be bumped up a little bit, they'll, talk through that with you as well. That leads into those site verification visits. So really just keep in mind the judge is assessing the customer experience from the moment they call you to book in that appointment to when they leave your business or your property, or they finish their meal, or they go away. What is the first interaction they have with you, and what's the last interaction they have with you? Be really conscious of that. Do you send a follow-up email asking how their experience was? Is that part of your normal customer service? And I think it's really important to remember that the judge needs to experience your product as any normal customer would. Don't sort of look to roll out the red carpet for your judge. They want an authentic experience. So it should be a product or a tour or a type of accommodation experience that someone could just book on your website. It shouldn't be a VIP tour where you do things that normal customers wouldn't do. So, and they'll understand if that's an authentic experience because they would have checked out your website beforehand as well. Yeah, question on that one, Kathy? Yeah. Sure. Book it now. Yeah, absolutely. So just for those on the Zoom, there was a question regarding accommodation properties with site visits from the judge. So in terms of, firstly, your question, Kathy, yes, if you are an accommodation category, a site visit judge will look to stay the evening for one night. And now I understand in our captive tourism market that we're operating in at the moment, we need to book in a date with the judge as soon as possible. The judge will touch base in about a couple of weeks' time. We're just doing those allocations now. However, for our accommodation nominees, please just send me an email with potentially a few dates and I'll try and allocate a judge to you. Or if you can just set aside a date or two. The time frame, just for everyone to note that's in an accommodation category, would be the 19th of July, so just after school holidays wrap up, to the 27th of September is the very last date. So we do have a couple of months leeway there to get a judge booked in. My suggestion would be to set aside a couple of dates and I'll let you know who your judge is and make sure that suits their availability as well. Thanks so much for the question. That's great. Yeah, Renee.
Just a question on that. Is that where you have multiple accommodation
Sure. So just a question there regarding if you're in an accommodation category, you've got a few different types of rooms or accommodation variations. You want your judge to experience, I guess, probably not your most high-end offering, probably the one that you would refer to as your, your key product, your most frequently booked. When a guest thinks of your accommodation, that was the experience they went away with. So if you've got a really high-end luxury product with a certain price point, potentially one more that's maybe the middle of the road, but obviously acknowledging if other room types are available to view, the judge would like to get a sense of those other variations. But I understand that everyone's got quite full capacities, so whether that's plausible or not, we can talk through. Maybe in that scenario, and Renee will have a chat about which one would be best to set aside. And it's always good to think, if you're in an accommodation category, you're in the 4 to 4.5 star deluxe category, then you'd want to provide them with that product that aligns with that star rating. So yeah, it's a little bit hard when you've got variations in room types. We'll talk that through later. Is there any other questions on, maybe I'll go back around site visits? Yeah. Yeah, so just a question there regarding images of graphs. Try to keep the words to, minimal words in a graph, but they do not count towards your word limit. A good rule of thumb is, under 6 words doesn't count. Over sort of 6 words in a caption counts towards your word count. And for a graph, I would want to see, that it's not text heavy, but really more of a graphic that gives an idea of data without getting too much text in there. Yeah. And I think that sort of the underpinning point that I probably want to make there is, the judges are not going to be hard and fast, especially in this year with the impact that businesses have felt in the qualifying period. So, there is a bit of grey area there. Obviously there's rules and boundaries to things, but where it's a little bit grey in terms of a graph with a few extra words, they're not going to deduct, a massive amount of points for something like that. And if you're ever unsure, just flick me an email with an example. Any other questions? Cool. So we touched on a little bit earlier about the ReviewPro license, and Martin really spoke quite highly of how great that is as a tool that you can use in your submission. Everyone does have access to a free account through their nomination. When I received your nomination, if you weren't already on ReviewPro, I have requested the setup of that account, so you'll have access to it within the next 1 to 2 weeks. And once it's set up, I then send you through a 2-page resource on how to make the most of your ReviewPro account. It's got some pretty nifty functionality where it can actually grab a graph that gives a nice, visual component of your reviews, your semantic analysis. And so we've got quite a few resources on how to leverage ReviewPro. These semantics, it's pretty clever. So it picks up the sentiment of what those reviews are saying, whether they're positive or negative. But we'll also share, if there's opportunity, if you're an accommodation provider and there's quite a few reviews that were of a lower score that mention something about bedding, potentially it's time to look at whether the bedding needs to be updated. So it gives you some tangible insights into what people are actually saying in those reviews as well. So I'll be sure to share those resources with all of our nominees in the next week or so as well. So in regards to the other key component to your submission score, being that for most categories, there is 20% of your overall score coming from those online consumer reviews. I will be manually jumping into ReviewPro and grabbing the GRI score from your account for the 2 financial year qualifying period. So to get that score towards your consumer rating component, you need to have 25 reviews over that 2-year qualifying period as a minimum. And then businesses who don't have that minimum number of reviews, unfortunately, I won't be able to grab a score from that component. So yeah, really happy to check out everyone's accounts and make sure we've got a score populating there. Yeah, yes, Martin. Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, great. Thanks so much for that, Martin. Yeah, great for a prompt for me to give background onto what ReviewPro is. So for those who don't know, it is a portal which will collate all online reviews for your business. I use either your TripAdvisor or your Facebook page URL to set it up, but once set up, it'll find reviews on all other sites. So anywhere, pretty much, over 175 different websites, it'll grab those reviews from. And just important to note in regard to the National Tourism Awards program, should you win at a state level, the consumer review component doesn't apply to your national submission. So you're being purely judged on that submission itself for your 100% marks. There's no consumer review element on a national scale. And just to clarify there, that consumer rating score does not apply to all categories. And there's just a list there of the ones it doesn't apply to. Hopefully everyone can see those okay. And then there are 2 categories where only 5% of your overall score will come from that consumer rating. So still a bit of an influence there, but just with the large diversity of businesses in those 2 categories, there's no inclusion. There's a 5%, inclusion of that consumer rating score. Before I move on from that, any other questions around the consumer rating element? Cool. So another sort of change to the program this year is that our judges will recognise a finalist that they believe showed great resilience in what was a difficult time. And that's based on your response to that COVID-19 impacts question. Obviously acknowledging there that question and your response might include impacts to your business from natural disasters, such as the bushfires in the hills and Kangaroo Island. So the judges will award a winner based on those responses. And the winner of this category will not progress to the national program. It's a standalone award at a state level, but there will be a separate judge's choice winner given at the national program from all of our state finalists. Now, just a quick mention there, I did talk on it a little bit with the portal overview. So if your business is not currently Quality Tourism accredited, those business standards questions do appear just before your awards submission. And our advice would be just to sort of complete those over the next 4 weeks. The reason being that you want to set aside the last 2 to 3 weeks to focus on formulating a beautiful polished submissions. So work through those business standards between now and then. And I offer 30-minute Zoom mentoring sessions through the business standards questions if you did need any support. I've had a couple of operators ask me what level of detail we're looking for in the business standards responses. And really, there's templates throughout each of the sections. For example, the business and marketing plan. If you don't currently have one, there's a great resource and template. If you click on the little blue question mark symbol once we jump into the business standard question set. But for the purpose of the awards, just connect with me if you're unsure how much information to share. But generally you can respond either in a paragraph text box or by uploading your business and marketing plan as a document. For our accommodation nominees, just a reminder that if your property is not currently star rated, The accommodation standards questions will appear. So you'll see that they are also another module in front of your awards submission. And that just helps us to double check that you're in the right accommodation category. It does give you an unofficial star rating at the end, but then you can choose to either adopt that star rating in an official sense or just use it for the awards process to check that you're in the right awards category. And just to note as well, we can change the category that you've selected anytime up until the 18th of August. So if there was a couple of criteria that your business fits within, we can make a change if need be. Oopsies. So just some key dates with just a quick list there. So like I spoke to earlier, we do have the opportunity to view an example of an award-winning submission. Booking those appointments in our office on Puri Street, just by giving me an email with a few dates and times that work for you. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to have that done virtually, just to respect the intellectual property of that example submission. But certainly I've got the submission here with me today if anyone would like to have a brief look. Otherwise, just flick me an email to book in an hour appointment in our office. That can be done anytime between now and the first week of August to check that you're on the right track. Ask the Expert sessions, Monday the 12th of July, those 30-minute appointments have pretty much booked up. So we've opened up a second day on the 19th of July. If you haven't already booked a mentoring session, those are completely complimentary to our nominees, so I do encourage you to do so. And those ones can be done in person in North Adelaide or just by receiving a phone call from one of our amazing mentors. The draft submission review I spoke to earlier, you can submit a draft from the 1st of July, but putting your best foot forward with almost a finished submission would be my advice for that draft submission review. And the last date you can submit a draft is the 21st of July. Just a reminder that those final submissions are due by the 18th of August. And the site visits, like I said, the 19th of July is when they'll be allocated in the portal for the judges, and the 27th of September is their final date for those site visits to be completed. Was there any other questions for those in the room? I'll just bring up the chat function as well. Yeah, Kathy? Oh yeah, great question. So that was just a query around the judges that are allocated for your submission review, your site visit, and was it, sorry, about the online review? So the judge that reviews your site, the judge that reviews your submission generally will not be the same as the one that comes out to do your site visit. We allocate judges for the site visits based on region, and we have teams of 3 judges. I can't even count anymore. 3 judges that are allocated to a whole category. So there might be this odd time that it is the same judge, but generally it doesn't cross over. The judge that comes out and does your site visit will jump online and complete the online review component before they do a site visit. And it's something they always did. We always ask them to get a really good sense of your business and become familiar with all your products. But now they've got a marked component to that, and it gives a bit more weighting to it. So yeah, that'll be done by the same judge. Any other questions? That's correct. So yeah. So the site visit judge, you know, might do 8 or so in your region, but yeah, not all in the same category, which I think is good because then it gives a, you know, a different judge's perspective on that site verification component. Yeah. Any other questions?